Welcome to Grammar and Punctuation video number 8. In this video, we're going to be covering parallelism and voice. Parallel structure is related to listing items in a sentence. So if we're going to have two or more elements listed in a sentence, we need to make sure that they are grammatically similar. So let's take a look at an example. They enjoyed eating and to sleep. Hopefully you can see that that reads a little funny. We have a problem with the verbs. We have eating and we have sleep. How can we make these similar? Well, we have two choices. They enjoyed to eat and to sleep, or they enjoyed eating and sleeping. Both of these would be correct. Just make sure you're consistent in your grammar. Making sentences parallel isn't that complicated. We just need to make sure things sound the same. Here are some examples of parallel sentences. I enjoy water skiing, sunbathing, and skateboarding. Hopefully you can see that these verbs sound the same. They all end in ing, and they are all single words. Nice and clear. I like to water ski, to sunbathe, and to skateboard. You'll see that we've started all of these with the word to. So we've stuck with a pattern. And lastly, Bert likes to water ski, sunbathe, and skateboard. So we have water ski, sunbathe, and skateboard. Don't worry about starting with the word to. That's perfectly fine because we haven't started a pattern. If we were to leave this to out in this example, this would be incorrect. I like to water ski, to sunbathe, and skateboard. You can see that we've started a pattern. Here we haven't started a pattern at all, so this is perfectly fine. Just be sure that you don't mix forms when we're looking at parallelism. Sometimes we are going to want to introduce our list items with a phrase. The key here is the same rule that we just went over. Be consistent. Here's an example that is not consistent. The boy complained that he had sore feet, that he had a sore back, and a splitting headache. You can see that we're missing that item here. This is how it should read. The boy complained that he had sore feet, that he had a sore back, and that he had a splitting headache. Now I can see that this reads a little bit redundant, so I'd much rather take these out or maybe just start the initial part of the sentence with that and not repeat that phrase over and over again. So this would be correct as well. The boy complained that he had sore feet, a sore back, and a splitting headache. Here's an unparalleled sentence for you to revise. Pause the video, convert this into a parallel statement, and come back when you're done. Okay, when we read through this, we have Paul recommended that City Council revise its salary increment structure, that City Council members should be paid less, and an overturning of the recent City Council pay raise. Hopefully you can see that this is very difficult to read in its current form. Let's see how we can convert this into a parallel statement. You'll see that I've taken the verbs, the action verbs, and placed them at the beginning of each list item. This is a common way that we can correct unparalleled statements. So I have Paul recommended that the City Council revise its salary increment structure, pay City Council members less, and overturn the recent City Council pay raise. Hopefully you can see that this sentence is much clearer in its parallel form. Now we're going to move on to voice, or voice of the verb. This tells whether or not the subject of the sentence performs the action, which is known as the active voice, or it's acted upon, which is known as the passive voice. In academic writing, we always want to use the active voice whenever possible because it is shorter and it is clearer. Before we can fully understand the active and passive voice, we need to learn a little bit more about verbs, specifically transitive and intransitive verbs. We're going to start off with intransitive. An intransitive verb is like an independent verb. If you remember independent clauses, they can stand on their own. Well, an independent verb can do the same. We can just have a subject and a verb, then a period, and that's the end of the sentence. It can stand on its own without a direct object. And we'll talk about direct objects in a moment. Let's look at some examples. The match ignited, period. Hopefully you can identify that as a complete sentence. And all we have is a subject and a verb. That means we have an intransitive verb. It's standing on its own without anything coming after it. The clock ticked. Period. Once again, an intransitive verb. We don't need any other explanation in this sentence because we can simply say the clock ticked. Transitive verbs are the direct opposite of intransitive. They are like a dependent verb. They can't stand on their own without what is known as the direct object in a sentence. Let's look at an example. The child received a gift. We have our subject, we have our verb. Can we place a period here? No, we can't in this case. The child received. There will be a question about this verb. What did the child receive? The answer to that question? A gift. That would be our direct object. So we have subject, verb, direct object. So transitive verbs will always have a direct object. Let's look at one more example. I forwarded the email. Subject related to the main verb, I. I'm the one doing the action. Verb, forwarded. Can we put a period here? No. We have that question. What is the question about the verb? What did I forward? The answer? The email. This would be my direct object. Subject, verb, direct object. Now that we understand subject, transitive verb, direct object, we can take a look at the active and passive voice. The active voice is exactly the same as the examples we just looked at. So we're going to have subject, the government, transitive verb, issues, and our direct object. What does the government issue? Well, in this case, taxes. Subject, transitive verb, object. That is the active voice and the type of writing that we want to stick to in academic writing. Now, passive constructs are the opposite. We're just going to take this sentence and flip it backwards. We're going to take the object, move it to the beginning, and we're going to take the subject and move it to the end. Taxes are issued by the government. So you'll see here that we've just simply taken this one and we've taken this object, turned it into our subject, take this subject and turned it into the object. Note that the actor is optional for passive constructs, which is another reason we want to, and it usually uses more words. Now we're going to move on to 5 questions about the active and passive voice. So if you haven't understood this concept up to this point, go back in the video before you come back here and get started. So here's the first question. I'd like you to pause the video and convert this sentence into the active voice. Okay, so we have the clauses in which the passive voice is found should be corrected. Hopefully you notice that the primary verb or the action verb is at the end of the sentence. This is usually a sign that we have a passive construct. Let's move this to the beginning and make this sentence make sense. Correct the clauses in which the passive voice is found, and you'll notice we still don't have an actor here. We have an implied subject, so we could add that in as well. You should correct the clauses in which the passive voice is found. Here's another one. Pause the video and come back after you've converted this into the active voice. So with this sentence, we have proper writing should be used in research papers. This is our primary action verb, and it comes quite late in the sentence. Let's move this to the beginning and make sense of it. Use proper writing in research papers. You should use proper writing in research papers. So hopefully you can see that it's much clearer when we convert these sentences into the active voice. Here's another one. Come back when you're done converting this to the active voice. Okay, in this one we have a short fragment at the beginning and then we have our independent clause. Most of the time, active and passive voice is going to relate to clauses, so it's going to be in the second part of the sentence. In a phone call, orders were issued from the president regarding the threat of several alien spacecraft. Okay, we can see that there's an issuing going on here, and we do have an actor, but the actor is late in the clause. So let's move this actor to the beginning of the clause, and then the verb will come with it. In a phone call, the president issued orders. Okay, right here, the president issued orders. Subject, verb, object. So we can tell that that's correct already. Here's another one. Come back when you're done converting this to the active voice. In this one, we have the floors are swept, washed, and sometimes waxed by the caretaking staff. Hopefully you can notice that we're talking about sweeping, washing, and waxing, and the caretaking staff is the actor. You'll notice that the actor is at the end of the sentence. Let's move this actor to the beginning, and then we'll have these active verbs right after the actor. The caretaking staff sweep, wash, and sometimes wax the floors. Hopefully you can see that this reads much clearer. Here's the last example. Come back when you're done converting this to the active voice. All right, in this example we have, after World War II, many soldiers' uniforms were stored in old army trunks. Well, let's get rid of this first fragment and look at our independent clause. We have many soldiers' uniforms were stored. Okay, this is kind of tricky. We see soldiers here and think that that might be the subject of the clause, but in fact it's the uniforms. The soldiers' uniforms is our subject, and they were stored in army trunks. Well, we want to convert this so that the soldiers are doing the action, okay, and storing is the action here. Okay, so we're going to have soldiers storing, and that's going to give us our subject, transitive verb, object relationship that we want. After World War II, many soldiers stored their uniforms in old army trunks. Okay, so we have subject, verb. What did they store? They stored their uniforms, object. So we can tell that that one is correct as well. Make sure that you try your best to always write in the active voice. That wraps up Punctuation and Grammar video number 8. If any of the concepts confused you, make sure you go back and rewatch the video.